Just as by way of introduction, my name is Sally Timmins and I'm an audit manager at Bishop Fleming, but I'm also a national leader of governance. So it's just useful to be able to understand both sides of the coin. So for those trustees in attendance on the webinar here today, I do understand your pain. While these slides are taking a few moments to load, apologies for that, I'll just let you know what we're going to be covering today. In my session, I'm going to be looking at the features of effective governance. So we'll take a quick whistle-stop revisitation of a few things like who is ultimately responsible, what are the trustees' duties. We'll look at the Charity Governance Code and of course the refresh that happened earlier in the year. We'll look at how to assess your own board effectiveness. And how useful an external review can be and what that might look like. We'll look at the value of trustee support and training and why it's important. And of course, the key to all of this is getting the right people in the right place, doing the right thing. So we'll look at how an overview and then basically an introduction really to Alistair about how the board can look to seek assurance and achieve that so that they actually have knowledge that they're making the right decisions with the right information and therefore solid and valid decisions. So technology is taking its time. I'll move on to my my third slide, which is about who is responsible really. So in training sessions that I've done with charities historically and very, very recently, it was interesting to actually understand how much of a light bulb moment this last 12 to 18 months has come in terms of responsibility, because of course with COVID, everybody's focus has been far more to risk and managing things very, very closely. And of course, ultimately, who is morally, legally, and reputationally responsible? And that's the trustees. And it was a bit of a surprise to me, I have to confess, that a number of people, not a huge amount of people in proportion, but certainly a number of people, to enough number of people for me to be concerned about it, didn't realise that actually it was the trustees who are ultimately responsible. So looking at the essential trustee, there is some really good information. Here we go. Can you see the slides now, hopefully? Let's move on a little bit here to catch up with where we're at. So there is good documentation available to allow trustees to understand what their roles and their duties are. David's already pointed to some charity commission guidance documents already. As a trustee, there are some really good information. There is some really good information available. There's the welcome, you're a charity trustee. There's the essential trustee 6 main duties. So really there is a good resource for trustees to actually be able to look and see and understand what their responsibilities are. And of course, it all comes back in principle to the Nolan Principles. Hopefully that's a familiar term to everybody. So it's the 7 principles of public life. They're on the screen there. I don't need to go through them all individually, but you'd be amazed how many times where there are issues in charity governance and where there are in governance generally, it's not just in relation to charities, but how often it comes back to a fundamental underlying Nolan principle that somebody has forgotten. So objectivity, for example, honesty and openness. When there is an issue, quite often you can look at the very core of that and it does come back to fundamentally a Nolan principle. So it's always good to remind yourselves of what they are periodically. And of course, sign up on an annual basis. If you can get your trustees and your board to actually look at a code of conduct annually, then that's really, really helpful, because it just brings that to the fore of your mind, that what are we actually here to do and why are we doing it? So looking at standards of governance, there are various different examples throughout the internet that you can look at to see what that might look like. But the gold model has been developed in conjunction with the Charities Commission, and that is the Charity Governance Code. It is an aspirational, high standard of governance. It's a voluntary adoption. It's something that you would need to state in your trustees report. It is voluntary, but it is a deliberately aspirational goal model to reach for. The code is a really good guide, gives behaviours and expectations and knowledge, examples of good practice, and it was refreshed last year. I say refreshed rather than rewritten, because there were two of the pillars, as they're called, of the code that were enhanced particularly. The first one was integrity, which was broadened, and actually when the code has been refreshed, it's a change in language. It's more about making sure that these behaviours are actually lived and breathed throughout the organisation. So it's not integrity has been broadened now, so that it's not just the reputation and conflict issues, but also it includes behaviours, value, ethical principles, and to avoid undue power being wielded in any one particular place. And of course, safeguarding. Safeguarding is very, very important, and I'll come back to that. And the other pillar that was refreshed is the equality, diversity and inclusion, which basically, exactly as it says, but it's broadened now to root the behaviours all the way through the organisation, so that everybody has the right to be valued and listened to in the same way. So when you're going to have a look at your own performance, your own board's performance, how are you going to do that? You need to have the right people around the table, and of course, understand that everybody knows what they're doing and they're asking the right questions. The bottom line is that good governance is not an optional extra anymore. It's essential to charities' effectiveness and probably their survival too. Charities need to be able to demonstrate that they take it seriously, and allow it to change the way that they operate. So actually, the gold model of doing the right thing is lived and breathed all the way through the organisation. And part of the way to establish that is actually happening is obviously evaluation, self-evaluation. So looking at the board's own effectiveness at least every year. And then every third year, looking for third-party validation or assurance to help answer that question about how are we doing and how effective is the board's governance. So a third, an external review every 3 years is recommended by the Charity Commission, and is a highly valuable tool. We'll come back to that in a moment. In fact, now. So what is an external review? It's an expert view on what your governance practice looks like, how well you're doing it. Are you considering enough information in your decision making? Are you making decisions based on the right information and effectively? Have you got diversity across the board? And when I say diversity, I mean in the true sense of diversity. It's a very big topic at the moment, and has been for a while. But to actually understand what true diversity is, it's not just about age and sex and etc. It's more about including also historical experiences, background, where your education has come from and what your understanding of the situation at hand is. And of course, when you do have a really genuinely diverse board, then it does stimulate really good discussion and challenge, and that is the basis of good decision making. So the Charity Commission, as I say, recommend an external review every 3 years. It's a fresh view, and a wonderful thing a fresh view can be, actually, to have a new look at what you're doing. It really does help to validate good practice. Can help you consider things that you hadn't thought about. And sometimes, as we all know, being a trustee on a board, as I said, well, more than one, actually, 3 boards at the moment, it's not easy sometimes. Sometimes you get so ingrained in a challenge or a situation that you can't see the wood for the trees, and actually a fresh perspective can be really, really helpful. And of course, it's also a learning opportunity to see how others tackle governance and to hear about the experience of other organisations in a obviously anonymous fashion, but in principle about governance practices. And it's an opportunity to discuss your issues and concern with someone who can genuinely look at things independently and be there to help. It's particularly useful in conflicts of interest, conflicts of loyalty, and perhaps where relationships have become frayed or strained, and there may be challenges there for all sorts of different reasons. So trustees, they do need to keep up to date. We do need to keep up to date, and we need to keep learning. And why is that so important? It's vital that trustees work collaboratively with the executives in the charity to a common goal. And of course, communications, as I said a moment ago, can get frayed and lost along the way. I've seen many examples where trustees have asked executives for information so that they can make a decision, and actually what they're asking for either is too ambiguous, or they're not being clear enough, or perhaps they are, and the executives don't really either have that information, or in some cases actually want to provide it to them. So there's all sorts of reasons why that collaborative working has to be right, but they have to know their stuff. So the trustees do need to know what they're talking about. They do need to know what they need to see. They need to understand what information they're asking for, and make sure that they're not wasting the valuable time of either their own energies, or the paid staff and executives within the organisation. And of course, everything changes on a very regular basis, particularly over the last 12 to 18 months. It's been obvious in so many ways how quick and fast the guidance has been coming out. So they do need to keep up to date, because circumstances do change. And of course, within that evidence and the minutes and all those valuable discussions and decision making, timing of that is absolutely important. So if a decision has been made and the guidance changed recently, then of course that particularly could be relevant if there were a situation where the charity came under scrutiny for any reason. So it's important that the trustees do keep up to date and know what they're there to do, know their role. Don't stray into the operational issues. Keep with the strategic role. And work together really effectively with the team, gathering as much relevant information, and then governance can flow so much more fluidly. The trustees do need the help of the staff, as I said already, to keep abreast of developments. And of course, the executives amongst us will realise that actually the more you keep your trustees informed and the more help you give them to understand current changes, etc., it really does make a difference. And remember, no one knows everything. It is a game. It is a team game. So trustees do need to know when they're at the limit of their knowledge, and that's absolutely fine. It's a strength to know that actually, that actually you need to take some external advice, and being able to recognise that limitation is really important. So I just slipped a slide in there, which you'll be able to see when you see the notes around. You've probably already seen it. It's an example of one of the Charity Commission guidance notes on some of the questions that trustees can ask in relation to certain circumstances. There are all sorts of notes around like that. So new trustees who don't particularly know what they need to ask, then there's an example of in the slides there. And of course, if the governance isn't up to scratch, what happens? Well, actually, things can go wrong very quickly. Bad decision making can be a route to all sorts of challenges, and of course, ultimately, if funds run out, what are we going to do? The going concern issue that David's already spoken about. Of course, there's a risk of fraud. If the framework of accountability isn't there, then fraud and abuse of funds and mismanagement is a risk. Of course, risk management is somewhere where you have to pull all that together. Alistair is going to talk about risk and assurance shortly. Safeguarding I've highlighted in red because it's something that is not immediately obvious. Again, frighteningly, was not immediately obvious to a collection of trustees I spoke to earlier this year. And actually, one of the trustees said to me, "You don't seriously expect us to understand what safeguarding is in its detail?" And I said, Well, of course, you need to know that the framework is there to make sure that the safeguarding issues that the charity is facing are accounted for. So you need to be assured that the safeguarding is covered. You don't have to know the excuse me, the infinite detail of it, but of course you need to be aware and assured that the safeguarding necessary within the organisation is appropriate and enough. And safeguarding is a massive issue that obviously covers a huge array of things, including mental health and well-being. It's not all about the obvious things that immediately come to mind. Safeguarding is a really big topic. Cybersecurity, prosecution, reputation is everything. And David has already spoken to you about Kids Company, given examples. It's reputation. I cannot express how important that is. It has to be the prime directive to retain in the top priorities of the charity. Because by their very nature, of course, charities are reliant on fundraising and goodwill, and they are at the mercy. We are at the mercy of the reputation and public opinion. So good news, as we know, does travel fast, but of course not as fast as bad news. So you have to constantly be working towards being accountable to your stakeholders. That's absolutely vital. So the framework of accountability really can give comfort and assurance that what good practice you think is happening really is. So the key to any defence is evidence, and for governance to stand up, the board needs that assurance. I'm just going to give you a couple of very quick examples that you probably, well, I'm sure already know, but when things go wrong, they really do go wrong. So you may remember about Oxfam, that was a massive, massive deal. Of course, hit the charity significantly in 2017 and prior. And of course, Save the Children, again, it was a very, very high profile case. The Charity Commission did investigations into both of those, and the reports are publicly available. In connection with the Oxfam one, the Charity Commission said, no charity is more important than the people it serves or the mission it pursues. Absolutely right. We need to keep things like that absolutely at the forefront of our mind, and look at how our operation is running. Is it working? If you do get complaints, or if you do hear things, and inevitably there will be bumps in the road, but the key is look at it, investigate it, address it, and listen to the lessons that are learned. So new trustees, I just wanted to highlight that obviously when you do have gaps on your board, the main way to recruit to your board is of course on skill gaps. So an annual skills evaluation is always a useful thing to do. It's, as I said before, a really good way to stimulate good discussion is to have strong challenge, seek proper assurance, and have the right information to make your decisions. So new trustees have to be able to contribute to that. So if you do seek diverse opinions, you should seek diverse opinions and encourage that challenge. Make sure that you have a really robust induction process, because that really will help your trustees to get up to speed really, really quickly, and encourage questions. There are no stupid questions. Really, there are no stupid questions. So anybody who is sitting around a table as a new trustee should be encouraged to ask, do you understand what that acronym means? I mean, the amount of times I've sat around a table and an acronym comes out, and some people don't know what it is, and actually I sat there myself thinking, what on earth does that one mean? So you have to sit and stand up and actually ask these questions. Stand tall and don't be afraid. Ask those questions, because you cannot make decisions if you do not know what you're talking about. And I have a number of examples which I haven't got time to go into today to cover that, but where decisions have been made based on an acronym. And after the event, do you know what that acronym was about? No, I haven't got a clue. And it's worrying how common that actually is. So there are no stupid questions, and new trustees are actually the best way to encourage some of those out. And as I said before, know when to seek external advice, because nobody knows everything. And when there is a gap around the table, sorry, just checking that question, whose responsibility? Oh, it's gone. Let me just get that conversation back up. Whose responsibility is it to plan trustee inductions? It's the chair. It's the chair's responsibility to look after the board. It can be, obviously you should have a governance professional on board. Old style word is clerk, obviously. But you know, the governance professional is the person to pull all those documents together, a paid professional. But it's the chair's responsibility to oversee the training, skills, and effectiveness of the board. So absolutely, just to answer that question there. And as I say, just you know when to seek external advice. If there is a skill gap you haven't got, have a look to see if you can co-opt that onto your board, or buy that service in the meantime, because it could be something that is you know, a game changer in terms of decision making. So just finally, governance is a framework of accountability. You do need to do all these things on the screen, you know, obviously protect your charity's money, know the financial position and keep financial records, manage expenses and payments to trustees can be very tricky to stay on the right side of, and deal with financial problems quickly. In essence, as I say, going back to the Nolan Principles, really keep those the fore of your mind and make sure you have the right people in the right place doing the right thing. As I said before, trustees and leaders do need to work together. Assurance of good practice is what is always fantastic evidence to be able to evaluate and know that what you think is happening actually genuinely is. Manage risk and control, and keep the charity compliant and working for the beneficiaries. Keep that right at the very fore of your mind. And Alistair is going to cover assurance and risk in a minute. So there are some links there to some helpful charity governance code information from the Charity Commission, a list of the guidance documents and some Treasury documents just to help you in a few moments once you get the slides after the event.